storytelling is really what defines us as a species. We evolved to tell stories. It's really what sets us apart from all the other species. Other species eat, sleep, mate. They even use tools and language. But as far as we know, humans are the only species that use stories, and they have used them from the very beginning, and it's really the story of civilization comes in storytelling. Because storytelling gave us the opportunity not only to share information, but to gather information, to format it, if you will, to collect it, to save it, and to keep it moving forward so that we as a community could accumulate information rather than discovering things and forgetting it right away. So storytelling is at the core of what we are as a species. Now, why does deep down, every single one of us loves storytelling. We love hearing stories and we love telling stories. And so when we have the chance to do that, we get fully engaged. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people, and whenever we start with storytelling, they immediately light up with energy and with movement. And so storytelling is a great way to enter into any discussion, no matter what it is, and it's a great way to enter into writing. What I discovered when I realized how much storytelling moves people was that the structure of storytelling is also the structure of other elements of writing. The structure of storytelling tells us all we need to know about constructing a great sentence. It tells us all we need to know about constructing a great paragraph. It even tells us what the structure of analysis is. And so when we understand storytelling, we essentially have a template for everything we want to do as writers. And so when we start with storytelling, we really learn everything else, and now all we have to do is fill in the details. Now all we have to do is sharpen the angle on what the story is. Really, when you look at the situation, we all have so many skills to begin with. It's really just a matter of understanding what those skills are, how they need to be sharpened, and then adding a relatively few extra skills in order to make people accomplished. And that's really what the writing code is all about. You know, everything in the writing code begins and ends with the brain, because the brain is our tool, and it has certain powers and it lacks other powers. The brain is a fantastic instrument, as everybody knows. It's an incredibly complex instrument. It gives us all kinds of capacities for thinking and feeling and seeing and perceiving. And all this comes quite in handy when you're trying to put together a piece of writing. But all too often, people don't really understand how their brain works. They don't understand when it gets excited and when it gets bored. They don't understand what kind of tasks it has the capacity to do and when it has a tendency to melt down. And so as I've tried to figure out what kind of strategies and tricks can we use to make it easy on the brain, or what kind of tricks can we use to arouse the brain. And I'll just give you a couple examples. One of the things that the brain does not do well is multitask. In contrast to what a lot of people in business say, and even some people in psychology, the brain can really only focus on one thing at a time. And so when you ask the brain to do 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 things at a time, whether you're asking it to construct a sentence or a paragraph, thinking about all kinds of different elements that have to be in that sentence or paragraph, or when you're thinking about editing, or when you're thinking about developing a character or action, or analyzing a complex abstract topic, if you're asking the brain to take on a whole bunch of different things at once, it can't do it. It's going to melt down. And if you ask the reader to take in all that stuff, the reader can't do it either. His brain or her brain is going to melt down as well. So one of the key things we try to do in the writing code is break down the process of writing into discrete steps and discrete actions so that you can focus on that action and get it right away. And you don't get overwhelmed, you don't get confused, you don't get overworked, and your brain doesn't melt down. You know, the interesting thing about working with writers, and I've worked with everybody from high school dropouts to junior high school and high school students, college students, accomplished authors, business people, the interesting thing that they all share in common is that they all intuitively have a mastery of most of the tools they need to write well and even write fast. The problem is that they don't always know all the tools they have, and they're missing a few other tools. And so what you have to do to master anything is understand everything you need and understand everything you have and how it all works. It's kind of like having a toolbox. If I had a toolbox that had a hammer and a saw and a screwdriver, Phillips head screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, the whole bit. And if I were to just give it to someone who knew nothing about what the tools were, they wouldn't be able to make much use of them. But if I were able to say, look, with this hammer, you can drive a nail into a piece of wood, and here's how you do it. You hold the handle, and then you swing the hammer and hit the head of the nail and so forth. They would get it right away because they've been swinging at things their whole lives. That's another thing we do. We move a lot, we swing. And so it would be easy to show somebody that they could do something like that, because in a way they've been doing something similar like it. They're similar to it. In a way they've been doing something similar to it their whole lives. The same thing is true with all the skills of storytelling and with all the skills of writing. You know, we've been spending our whole lives telling stories and explaining things and figuring out what works, what words get a rise out of people and what words bore people and what words confuse people. We know all that, but we need to bring it out of the toolbox, label all the tools, figure out how they work in ways that we might not realize, and then figure out what tools we're missing and then add them to the toolbox. Let me give you an example about what the brain can do and what the brain can't and how we can apply that to writing. Think about the sentence. Hemingway and others have pointed out that the sentence is the single most important element of all writing. If you can write a great sentence, you can write anything. After all, anything you write is just a series of sentences. So do it right one after another and you can be a good writer. Brain studies have shown that we pay the most attention to everything at the beginnings and endings of things. And so that got me to thinking, if we pay the most attention to what happens at the beginning and ending of things, why don't we put our most important and our most exciting material at the beginnings and endings of sentences, the beginning and endings of paragraphs, and of stories, essays, sections, the whole bit. And so that's how we came up with Start Strong, Finish Strong. If you can capture the reader, if you can give the reader something they want to use at the beginning and ending, you will hold them throughout the whole piece. So if we want to start and end every sentence strongly, what do? Is there a trick that we can use to make it easy to do that? And the answer is yes. Typically when we write, we use the portrait view of the page, which is the vertical view of the page, and we write one sentence, period, then the next sentence, period, then the next sentence, and it wraps onto a new line, and then a third line, and a fourth line, and a fifth line. So what we end up with is a big block of text, and it's hard to tell where the beginnings and endings of sentences are. And so to make it easy to find out where the beginnings and endings of sentences are, I have my students instead write all their drafts using this landscape format. And what they do is they write one sentence every line, period, return. Another sentence, period, return. Another sentence, period, return. And we single space it, and then we double space between the paragraphs. Now the question is, how does that help? How does it help to have only one sentence per line? Well, the answer is real simple. First of all, if you want to see if your sentences are starting strong, all you have to do is run your finger down the left side of the page and line by line check. Did this sentence begin strong? Did this sentence begin strongly? Did this sentence begin strongly? And if it didn't, it's easy to fix it on the spot. If you want to see if your sentence ended strongly, all you have to do is run your finger down the right side of the page. It's a little more jagged because sentences tend to vary in length, but that's all right. It's still easy to find the end of the sentence. Now, the problem with this original portrait view is that it's hard to track down where the beginnings and endings of sentences are. And so it's hard to check your own writing. It's hard to see if you're beginning and ending strongly. The problem with the portrait view is that when we write in dense blocks of type, it's hard to pick out where sentences begin and end because everything is put together in a big block. You have to go hunting for the beginnings of sentences and hunting for the ends of sentences. And that's frankly too much work for your brain to do. Your brain rebels, your brain melts down, your brain kind of goes off and forgets about the job when you're looking for the beginnings and endings of things in a big block. So when you use the landscape view, it's easy to track down the beginnings and the endings, and so you'll do it. And it's a lot easier to correct what you're doing, and it also gets you into a rhythm. When you write one sentence a line, another sentence on another line, another sentence on another line, you get in a rhythm of paying attention to every single sentence and making sure that every single one is right, every single one starts off clearly and strongly, every single one ends strongly with a clear kind of conclusion or image or question that you want to leave the reader with. And so this little simple trick using the landscape view makes it a whole lot easier not only to write, but perhaps even more important, to edit any piece of writing that you have.
And when you
well, it's funny, when you look out in a classroom, whether it's only 20 people or 40 or 80 or however many it is, this little flash of recognition just kind of ripples across the room, because people realize that the sentence is the most important unit of writing, but they're so kind of stuck in writing in the old format. They're so stuck kind of being in the middle of a big mess, and we've all had that experience. I know that I have. They're so used to that experience that this comes as like a little beacon light. They realize that it's actually quite easy to check out the things that matter in their writing. And if it's easier, it means it's much more likely to happen. You know, it's one thing to learn a skill, and it's one thing to understand a skill intellectually, and it's one thing to appreciate the logic behind it and why it makes all the sense in the world to do. But if you don't have a clear, simple, direct way of applying your skills right away, you're probably not going to use it, you're probably going to forget it, and you're probably going to fall back into the old ways of doing things. So when I was teaching at Yale and I saw all these incredible, brainy, passionate people make some of the same mistakes week after week, I was kind of determined to figure out what are some requirements that I can make that force them to do the right thing right away. Because ultimately, any kind of skill, any kind of thing that you do well, you have to turn it into a habit in order for it to make a big difference in your life. So if we could figure out a way to kind of put people in a format where they learn the skills, made them habits, and then from that point off they could go and develop and exercise and use all of this amazing creativity that they have, that would make all the difference in the world. So we came up with a number of applications for the writing code and all the little tricks and systems that we have. And the landscape view, which we've talked about on another occasion, is one of those applications. There's also ways that we can put story development and character development and the editing process and the analysis process. There's a number of other simple tricks that if you just do them, they will make your life so much easier right away. They'll make you a whole lot more productive right away. You don't have to wait to put these skills to work. With the right applications, you can write better and write faster right away. One of the problems with all kinds of learning systems is that they don't always give you a way to use the skills right away. And if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think the great thing about the writing code is that it shows you how to apply the skills right away, and you get immediate benefit. You don't have to wait and to develop a whole cluster of skills that are complex and take a long time. You don't have to wait to get a benefit. You can get a benefit on day one. The writing code works because it taps skills you already have. It taps the abilities that you've been developing your whole life. A lot of us have skills that we once used a lot and we forgot about, and so they went dormant, and we don't even know we have them anymore. And what we do with the writing code is we pull out of storage all the skills that you have, and we show you how to use them again, how to sharpen them, how to make them better, and then we add a bunch of other skills that are just as simple, just as intuitive. And when you put them all together and when you're given applications so that you can work them right away, all of a sudden you go from being a mediocre to a terrific writer, or from a terrific writer to a great writer. It's really an amazing system because it doesn't work against you. It doesn't tell you you have to change, and it doesn't tell you you have to be something different than what you are. It says, look, take full advantage of the skills, take full advantage of the passions that you already have and put them to use. Here's how you can do it easily and right away. Well, the writing code gives you all the skills you need. Most of them you already had, but it helps you understand how to use them. It gives you another set of skills that you might not have, but you can easily learn. And at the end of the day, you end up with a complete repertoire of skills that you can use right away.